Hello, everyone. I'm Saleha, and this is Chai, Chat, and Community. Tonight, we are talking about ADHD. And to talk more on it, joining me are Kelly, Ricky, and Dr. Soumya Basu. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining me tonight.
Hi, Sal.
Hi.
Hello.
So, before we start, Kelly, do you want to tell us something about yourself?
Sure. So at the moment, I work as a competitive gymnastics coach, and I study a master's degree in primary teaching. So that's
Why
what I'm doing at
teaching?
the moment. Yeah. So I love working. I love working with kids and teaching. So I decided to become a teacher after working in gymnastics for a while. So
Okay, thank you. Ricky, we've met before.
We have. Yeah, something interesting about me. I grew up originally in Brisbane and have since lived in Tonga for a year, Sydney for a year, and have called Melbourne home for the last 5 years, studying counselling. And in my part time, I love to write and have a blog called boyunderthebridge.com. And I'm pretty open about my life experiences and love to learn from others too.
Thank you, Ricky. Soumya, thank you. And
Um,
you've been my guest before too.
yeah, as I mentioned before, I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist. I work for Monash Health and Monash University. I have a private practice too. I have trained from India, from a place called Central Institute of Psychiatry, which is one of the oldest training institutes in Asia. And then I came here to Melbourne in 2004, trained to become a child psychiatrist, and I've been doing child psychiatry for more than 15 years now.
Thank you. So, Soumya, I'll start with you. What exactly is ADHD and what are the typical signs?
ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, is a neurodevelopmental disorder. So it's a brain-based disorder, uh, which can easily be, a lot of research for many years now to show that it is a neurological and neurodevelopmental condition. Starts from childhood onwards, and got a big genetic endowment for its causation. But the diagnosis is mainly a clinical diagnosis. It consists of about six cardinal symptoms: hyperactivity, impulsivity, inattentiveness, problems with planning, organization, and time management. The most explosive symptoms that is easily visible would be the impulsivity and hyperactivity, which is quite evident right from the beginning. But if the patients are presenting with mainly inattentive variety, it is often not diagnosed or difficult to diagnose. Um, so for diagnosis, normally use a system of diagnosis called the DSM, which is an American-based diagnosis, but worldwide it is used. It's very much popular in Australia. And according to DSM-5, which is the current diagnostic system, we have ADHD can be of three varieties: Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, combined variety, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder with mainly hyperactive and impulsive, and ADHD, mainly inattentive ADHD. So that is in a nutshell what ADHD is all about.
And what are the typical signs?
The typical signs are, a child would be a bit hyperactive. It is at times, a lot of researchers call that the ADHD can be basically a misnomer. It is a much more fundamental difficulty than what ADHD just signifies. It's a big problem with self-regulation, executive functioning, and incorporation of that into social brain. So if a child has major difficulties in um, holding their attention span, not being able to have a long attention span. It can impact their socialization. That can impact their ability to take other people's perspective. They can have major problems with uh, their learning, their academic performance, and on top of that there can be tremendous hyperactivity which is difficult to manage, and then they get into trouble as a result of that. With that, there is impulsivity in thoughts, in actions, doing things without thinking, saying things without meaning to. And then there is another big area of impulsive emotions, so emotional regulation difficulty, so becoming angry, upset, and the and behaving in a less matured manner. So compared to the age appropriate, uh, peers, they might behave in a much younger manner, which can cause difficulties in peer relationships, parenting, conflicts with their parents, and and often they can also present with aggression, emotional regulation difficulties. So it's the presentation often uh, for younger children can be explosive emotional outbursts, aggression. That can be the presenting complaints. But as I have said, not all children present in that way. Some of them can just fly under the radar, and they, especially people who have got this inattentive variety, who are anxious and who are not that aggressive, and for those children diagnosis might be a major problem, that we they can fly under the radar. So in our normal clinical experiences, when we see children with significant aggressive behavior, in that group there can be a overdiagnosis of ADHD. But then for the inattentive variety, there is often an underdiagnosis. So they can present at a later age with anxiety symptoms and symptoms of depression in the background of chronic academic difficulties. And the other things that I've mentioned is, it's called the executive functioning, the frontal executive functioning, problems with planning, finishing a task, starting a task, and finishing of a task, reading comprehension, which needs sustained attention. That can be problematic. And some of these kids would avoid doing tasks which needs those mental efforts. And the the sense of time can be a major problem, not being able to finish time in a timely manner. So that can be a big problem. Easy distractibility. Often they can sound like they're off with the fairies and not focusing and not being able to. So they're in the classroom. There's a little, cat that they have seen outside the window, and they're following the cat, and then they're forgetting what the teachers are saying, and then suddenly they realize they have not heard what the teachers have said. So this sort of presentations are quite common.
Thank you. Kelly, Ricky, do you want to share your experiences? Kelly, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I relate to a lot of that was just said. If there was a cat outside the window, I'd definitely be watching it. So, so I was initially diagnosed with ADHD, inattentive ADHD, when I was 6, and I was treated up until I was 11 years old. And in primary school, I was bullied for taking medication. So I told my mom that it didn't work anymore. I didn't really understand why I was taking it in the first place, but I didn't really want to take it because I was getting bullied. So I told mom that it wasn't really working, and then my treatment just stopped when I was 11. When I was 18, I was in year 12 and I was having trouble concentrating in class. So I went to the GP and told the GP that I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was younger, and if I could get a referral to a psychiatrist. And the GP said that ADHD doesn't exist. Not that I didn't have it, that it didn't exist. So yeah, that was, my request was declined, and I I didn't seek anything else from then. And then when I was about 22, in 2018, I came across a TED Talk. I was scrolling on Facebook, and there was a TED Talk on ADHD, so I watched that, and I just related to everything in it. So I decided to seek a diagnosis then. And this GP, like, I did a lot of research after that TED Talk, and then I went to a GP who told me that I didn't have ADHD because I had a job at the time, but I'd actually been fired from about like 6 jobs in 5 years. But I don't know if I told her that. But and then I started crying, and then she's like, "Oh, well, okay, I can give you a referral to a psychiatrist, but it's going to be really expensive." I thought that was quite condescending and rude, but she ended up giving me a referral, and the psychiatrist diagnosed me with ADHD. So that's
Wow.
My story for diagnosis.
And then what happened, Kelly, after the diagnosis?
The psychiatrist put me on medication, and then I changed psychiatrists because I didn't really like that psychiatrist, and then went to one that specializes in ADHD. And that treatment's really good. Since then, so before I was getting really bad grades in school, and I did an undergrad degree, but I really struggled. I got like average grades in that, but since I've been medicated in my master's degree that I'm completing now, I'm getting like really high marks, like high distinctions in most of my assignments. So it's definitely been life-changing having a diagnosis for sure.
Wow. Ricky?
I can just say, like, I can definitely relate to seeing a psychiatrist and being told something incorrect. The first psychiatrist I actually went to see about ADD told me that because I came to my appointment on time, I couldn't have it, even though I'd waited 2 months for the appointments.
Wow.
And so it was pretty disappointing. A lot of things that he said were easily dismissible. But actually did only came getting diagnosed at 30 years old, so it took a long time. In school, I was pretty energetic and a bit of a clown, but I was never problematic to the point where anyone had to get involved. Daydream a lot, and it was more like in my adult life, I found working in an office difficult. I would easily be distracted or distracting others, but it just wasn't something that kind of really came up till I became aware that I wasn't making as much progress or on top of everything the way that other people could be. And then, having just difficulty at certain jobs, I was like, I think there's something to kind of look into here. And before that, I just had periods of kind of lower self-esteem and depression, but I never really associated that was part of the ADD because I didn't know. I thought it was for kids who bite other children and flip tables and are real like out there. So I ended up getting diagnosed pretty quick. The psychiatrist I went to see after that one, who wasn't able to help, was a specialist in it. And I just brought all my report cards that my parents sent me from Brisbane, which was pretty convenient. So we had all the evidence in the teacher's writings. A lot of could achieve more if I paid attention, not living up to full potential distracts others. And so I got my diagnosis in 2017, but unfortunately the medication has kind of given me side effects. So it's kind of been like a bit of a merry-go-round trying different medications. But when I'm on them for the initial month or so, definitely without a doubt notice an impact. It's just unfortunate that they are stimulants, so you get all these other side effects that you don't really want. But I was able to, while taking medication, do 4 weeks of full-time work and 2 subjects at university. So I was really amazed at my ability to just get so much done. But in comparison, when I'm unmedicated, I definitely noticed the difference. And I kind of describe it as like just finding it really hard to juggle everything and trying to catch all these plates at once. And you're just like, I need more arms. So, yeah.
So is this continuous medication, Ricky?
Yeah, the medication, you gotta stay on it. I mean, there is this whole element of learning different skills and those kind of ways to manage your life, which does help. But I kind of see medication as putting more gas in the tank, and that's how I've often described it to my doctor. Is that like I just feel like there's not enough gas in the tank and computing power to get absolutely everything. So at the moment, sometimes I just take it intermittently, but I am due to see my doctor again to maybe try something else.
Yeah, I think that taking breaks from the medication definitely helps it. Like if you take it every day, I feel like getting less and less effective like as it goes on. But if I take like
Yeah.
just say one day off, I get nothing done on that one day. That's just gonna be a day of being useless. But then after when I start taking it again, I'll like feel it starting to work
Yep.
again.
Yeah.
Soumya, you have to say something? Is
Yeah, I mean, it's a there are three different types of medications. The which are really good for ADHD. We've got stimulants and then
Mhm.
non-stimulants. Under the stimulants, we have methylphenidate, which we call Ritalin or Ritalin LA, and Concerta. These are the three medications. The Ritalin is a short-acting one, and most probably Kelly may have been on Ritalin as a child, and that becomes a problem, because and that can be one of the major reasons for kids getting bullied. So the medications, the half-life is quite for the short-acting ones are quite low, for 4 hours. So when you're taking the medication, it is effective. When the medication is off, it is not effective. When you're coming down, it can be worse actually.
Mm.
So the
Yeah,
attention,
for sure.
concentration, emotional regulation can be actually worse when you're coming off the medication.
Mm.
Yeah, in the
So
evening, very
in the
bad.
evening it is really bad. So during the whole daytime, but you cannot take it at night because it can have significant side effects.
Mm.
The side effects are, the commonest side effects can be, problems with appetite suppression and sleep problems. These are consistent side effects. But then this is one of the most controversial areas in the whole of psychiatry because these medications have all been manufactured and discovered about 60, 70 years ago. But there was an entire period of time, including, almost like a, should I say false propaganda, but similar to that, I mean, articles in New York Times and top magazines about this epidemic of ADHD. Is it true? Is it not true? So, so because of the diagnostic process, it is a neurodevelopmental disorder, but the diagnosis is entirely clinical. And as Ricky was pointing, that the awareness is so less. I mean, sometimes it is often confused with conduct disorder
Mm.
or opposition defiant disorder, physical aggression towards others. Here we have got children who are not able to regulate. It's a self-regulatory problem. So and when because of the self-regulation problems, they are often put down. They are often minded. The parents are telling them, sit down, don't move. They perhaps they're just moving and playing with the fidget toy to regulate themselves. And uh, Sela, you will remember, back in India, if there was a child, if he moved in the chair, our teachers would throw a chalk at him and say that don't
yep,
move.
that's
you
right.
know
Yes.
so so these children, they are much more subjected to being told off, being put down, and as a result of that, often, this is happening at home, at school. The kids are always teasing them for not being able to regulate. You become a clown because that can be more. You can feel more empowered because it's under your control. You're not being able to regulate yourself, so you just start doing funny things so that you at least can control what you can control, because otherwise you are not being able to just sit at one place and doing all those things. So and the medications, can control this, and it can be quite magical. You take the medication and immediately there is an effect. There's very few medications in psychiatry where it can be that
Mm.
powerful. Appetite suppression is a problem, and there has been a lot of studies on growth retardation, on regular intake of the medication. But one of the effect of this medication is emotional regulation. So it's self-regulation and also regulation of emotions, because some of the children can really flip and flip bad. So taking the medication, it can have an anti-aggressive effect because of its efficacy in emotional control. So that there's a big controversy around this intermittent use versus continuous use of the medication. With adults with ADHD, intermittent use is often used. You have to do your university, finish a big task, a massive project. You take the medication. On other days, you're trying to just float through. That's a problem. But if you have to take the medication while you're going on a big drive and things like that, because of uh, the chances of distractibility. But then the other two medications that we have, one is called atomoxetine or Statera, and the other one is clonidine, where it's an alpha 2 agonists, and guanfacine. So these medications are also very good for ADHD, but those medications cannot be stopped at all. They have to be taken every day. There's this medication called guanfacine, which is it can cause decrease of blood pressure, and if you stop it suddenly, the blood pressure can
Impression
increase.
shoots up. Wow.
And the atomoxetine is another one, which is very good, but it is antidepressant like. It takes a longer time for it to act. uh, for methylphenidate and dexamphetamine, these two medications, which are stimulants, they can be chopped, changed, taken, not taken. The efficacy will be there when the medication is you're taking the medication.
Mm.
Um, I've got a question for you, but it's come as a text, so I'm going to read that. It says, "My grandson was hyper and at times offensive, but he is now 18 years old and now sober and matured. His problem continues to be lack of concentration, and he is forgetful and lacks recollection. Meets people but cannot converse. He is not on any medication."
Look, this is the, I mean, the adult outcome or adolescent outcome of ADHD. We've got a number of studies to show that the nature of ADHD change. As a young person, there's more hyperactivity, impulsivity. As you get older and older, the executive functioning, planning, organization, time management, uh, multitasking, juggling, uh, the cognitive flexibility that is needed to really do adult work is impacted. So as you get older and older, the inattentiveness can be a main problem. And inattentiveness can be all pervasive. For maintaining a conversation with others, you have to sustain attention. To take other people's perspective, to be interested in the other person, you need to hold this attention or working memory. So ADHD can cause major problems with working memory, and that can impact uh, the social interaction, and then it's a negative feedback. So once you have negative social interactions, you can become more and more insular. So it is quite most of the studies and the textbook teaching shows that about 60% of children who have had a diagnosis of ADHD continue to have ADHD like symptoms in adulthood. And the main manifestation of that is the executive functioning, the inattentiveness. So that uh, gentleman who has written that, it's almost like a textbook problem that we have. And um, I don't know why the patient is not on the medication, but uh, definitely it needs to be reassessed and visit back to the GP. Often what happens is these medications are all done by pediatricians in Australia and in the entire developed world, basically. In countries like India, it is often done by psychiatrists, but here it is done by pediatricians. And as soon as they turn 18, they find it difficult to get a psychiatrist, who specializes in ADHD, and that's why often they don't have any people to prescribe. And these are all Schedule 8 drugs. So These need special permissions, and only a pediatrician and a psychiatrist can get you the permission. So and that 18 is a transition age, very important. 18, as Kelly has experienced it. She went back at the age of 18 during busy, often because the cognitive load becomes tremendous, and that can have a big impact.
So Kelly, Ricky, you flipped. I think you've got to turn your phone. You're like upside down. Oh, Ricky's disconnected. Kelly, can you relate to this? To what Soumya just said?
About the inattentiveness, or
Yes.
um,
And
I was diagnosed with inattentive ADHD, but I feel as though, like, even though I'm mainly inattentive, I feel like I still can't, like, stop moving and stuff. So I don't know if I have a combined type or if that's part of it. Yeah, it definitely did get worse for me when I was in year 12, and navigating that. Studying was very difficult for me. Yeah.
but do you think now that you are on medication on and off, let's say when you're doing an assignment, does it help you?
The medication, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, like a huge amount. I can't describe how much. Yeah.
And then, of course, you said you don't take it on some days, and they are nothing days, but that's all right.
Yeah.
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 So because Ricky's got disconnected, and I'm sure he will log back in again, let me ask you this. This was for both of you. So the in-between stage, Kelly, when you were undiagnosed and you went off. So what did you go through then? Was it really tough? Was it?
Yeah. It was quite difficult, but because I didn't know why I was taking the medication initially, I didn't know, like, that was why I was struggling. I definitely had really low self-esteem, because when you're trying and then you fail over and over and over again, you're like, why can't I do the things that everyone else can do? Something wrong with me. But yeah, and I feel like I had, like, great attendance at school, but because I was never really mentally present a lot of the time, or when you miss, like, a little bit, like the start of the class, like, open your textbook to page 19 and do questions 1 to 5. If you, like, miss any of that, you're behind, and then you can't, like, engage in the rest of the class. Or if you miss some information at the start, then you can't really understand the rest of it. Like, there's nothing for the learning to scaffold with. So then that class is, like, all useless. So then you may as well just daydream the rest of it away, because it's too, like, once you ask the teachers too many times, like, for help, then they start getting frustrated with you. So you just, like, if you're inattentive, you just fly under the radar because you're not really causing any issues. My school reports would always say, Kelly is a nice girl, she just doesn't complete her work or does not pay attention in class. Yeah, so.
Ricky, what about you? You weren't diagnosed early during your childhood. You self-diagnosed.
Yep.
Did you face any challenges during childhood?
I was just a bit, like, playful, cheeky. Parents would get frustrated about having to repeat things to me, but it was very easy for me to get lost in my own world. And I think a lot of people around me benefited from the kind of energy and the way my mind worked. But like I said, like, in school, I wasn't problematic enough to warrant the teacher's attention. I wasn't, I just flew under the radar. I think that's the perfect way to say it, because teachers would tell me to, tone it down here and there, and I would, but I would never push it beyond that. So I was passing, like, I passed everything, but there was still a lot of room for improvement, but it wasn't enough to be like, just passing isn't really anything that's going to ring any alarm bells. So it was only until I really encountered more butting heads with life in different ways that, pushed me to get diagnosed.
And you did it by yourself, didn't you?
Yeah, it made me really go, something's up. And despite having worked in the mental health field sector for a few years at that point, I knew about anxiety, depression, and other conditions, but I didn't know too much about ADHD, and particularly thought it was more of something for like kids. That's very much the image it's painted with. And then I brought up the conversation with my doctor, who then put me to a psychologist who we spoke about it, and they ultimately said you got to go see a psychiatrist, and that's how I got diagnosed.
So, Soumya, what are the different diagnoses?
The I mean, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder. So it starts off right from the beginning. What we are getting here, the descriptions of Kelly and Ricky, we have got two very highly intelligent people, who are baseline intelligence were very high, and with a little bit of help, they've been able to really live up to the potential. With Kelly, it was picked up very early. It was picked up early. She benefited from the medication. She got bullied as a result. The bullying is because she has to take a midday medication. So because it lasts for
Yeah,
four
that's what
hours,
we would
uh,
have in the
and then
cabinet.
they,
So the class would say, yeah,
as in the
sorry.
madness, it's like a naughty pill, naughtiness pill, because most of these kids are hyperactive, so they are into trouble. So a child like Kelly, who is an introvert, and she doesn't kind of relate to those children. It's such a big stigma. The name itself, attention deficit hyperactivity, it carries such a big stigma. So as a result of that, a lot of kids do not want to take the medication. Would say that it's not benefiting, it's not helping, because no one can no one can see what's going on. And for Ricky, what happened is he was being well scaffolded by his family. Sometimes a bit scolded, but well scaffolded by school, family, friends, and somehow he performed sub threshold. And not up to his potential, but just perform. When he is up to his potential, he suddenly realized the power if he did not have, the ADHD. So when we think about intelligence, when we measure intelligence, it is divided into, verbal intelligence, performance intelligence. Performance intelligence is divided into what is called fluid reasoning, new learning ability, visual special index, solving puzzles and doing hands-on stuff, then working memory and processing speed. Now, working memory is one of the major problems with ADHD. So just not being able to hold information, together, or processing speed means
Which
concentration.
is what
So
Kelly just talked about. Yes,
talked about,
pages 1 to 5. Yes, questions 1 to 5.
yeah, and the thing is, with the medication, those working memory and processing speed can improve, and that can cause a major impact in them being able to focus and perform and feel much better. Now, because of having this ADHD, especially at this undiagnosed ADHD, children go through life. They have to go through life, but then they have to, go and read. But reading can be difficult because they can read, but it cannot. It does sometimes it doesn't make sense because you have to concentrate while reading. So if you read a big passage and then summarize what you have read, your comprehension can be difficult. So, and as a result of that, you're continuously going to school, you're not being able to perform, you're feeling anxious about school. That can result in anxiety and depression, and that can be a problem. And so as a child, you can see that often we see all this, internalizing problems. Some children, when they are, having being frustrated, when the teachers are telling them off, when the students are telling them off, they can become aggressive. They can present with what is called opposition defiant disorder, which means that they are defying the adults. Sometimes that can flow into conduct disorder, which means that they can become really little antisocial kids, joining in with kids who are similar in temperament, and get into gangs and troubles. As adolescents, lot of kids can get into, using substances, substance use disorders, and then that can be a major problem. And often what we are seeing, that explosion of the incidence of ice use and methamphetamine use. We have seen that a lot of these children had undiagnosed or diagnosed ADHD. So a whole plethora of clinical presentations can be present. High incidence of bipolar disorder when they are older, a whole plethora of personality disorders, you know, borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, that can be seen as young adults and adolescents with untreated or treated ADHD. And then there are family problems, interpersonal problems, problems with marriage, raising children, getting alienated from children. So quite a significant disorder. But throughout mm, last many years, it has been really sidelined into a, as Ricky was saying, even in the in the counseling or people who are dealing with mental health, it is being seen as a little child psychiatric disorder, children who are a bit naughty. But it's nothing like that. It is something very significant, which now, we are getting a lot of awareness around that. And look, about 17 years ago, when I came from India to Australia, I was a child psychiatrist, and I was seeing that in my adult patients. And when I was talking about that, this person was having ADHD as a child, there was a fear about the diagnosis, fear about prescribing, because these medications, have a street value. So, medications like Ritalin or dexamphetamine was in many years ago was being sold, for money as drugs. So, it has got a lot of problems around that. So, you know, and here we are getting Ricky and Kelly, who's had real good success, but from good families with good scaffolding. 20% of the kids with ADHD can have parents with ADHD. So, can you imagine the deadly combination of that? The parents are disorganized, the child is equally disorganized. There can be substance use problems in the family. So, and then childhood trauma as a result of that, and the children are coming here and then their behavior is now being seen as problematic because of abuse and family chaos. So that is family chaos and childhood abuse and child sexual abuse and stuff like that can present with emotional dysregulation, with the frontal lobe flipping. So it becomes a major clinical conundrum. So post-traumatic stress disorder, childhood abuse, they can all look like ADHD in children. And the problem is it is not either or, and it can be both. And so can you imagine the conundrum of difficulties that we have and to tease out all those difficulties can become a big problem. And then the impact of the illness on the parents and the reaction of the parents on the child, the impact of their behavior on the teachers, peers, rejections. There is a new term that now is being promoted a lot. It's called rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So lot of these children, they experience significant rejection throughout their lives. And then when they are adolescents, they're too terrified to have relationships. That great example that our the text message came, at the age of 18, this person does not want to have any friends, do not want to mix with others. So they can have, with a lifelong history of being rejected, because of peer relationship difficulties and family
Sometimes
difficulties,
even
being told off.
parents.
The parents, they can get exasperated. The child is accident prone, they're not in. Time management is a major problem. So getting up in the morning, brushing up, all these things a normal child will do in few seconds, but this child will not only, they're distracted, they're not only getting late, but they're getting all the other kids late. So the siblings are annoyed, the parents are annoyed, and everyone is telling that this child is all off with the fairies, you have to do this, and scold them, and then they feel that no one loves them. There's a
I
beautiful
definitely
movie.
relate to that.
You can relate to that, Kelly?
Yeah.
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 So
Ricky, can you? But you
Yeah.
wrote all your blog during that time, so you talked about your blog, and it was
Mm.
so touching. It was beautiful.
Well, like I think we spoke, like there's definitely been like positives when I look over things like once my sister pointed out how I've always been really like obsessive about things. And I think like when I find something that I really enjoy, it really does help you to go the distance in that field. But but then it is just, of course, the challenges with everything else, like normal duties, um, that do make a challenge. But I can their RSD and that kind of sensitivity I can definitely relate to, and I think I found that the longer you go along through life and the more like trouble you have, the more it can affect your confidence applying yourself and things moving forward. And I on my own journey, it hasn't just been the medication. I feel that's one component, but there's a big part of it is just the self understanding and that self knowledge, and learning about yourself and kind of addressing all the emotional damage that's been done over the time and correcting that,
Yeah.
regardless of just what the medication does, because the medication won't undo all that unloving that you didn't get and all that like times you talk down yourself in your head. The medication won't undo that, so that's another piece of work.
So, what do you mean by emotional damage? Is it emotional damage by yourself, or the wider community,
Um,
parents, friends?
I guess it's just the experience of negative emotions, like feeling like you're not meeting the mark, or feeling like when people get frustrated and they express the frustration, like I always have to tell you, that kind of affects your self-esteem. So you can pick that up in many ways, and even if people around you are really lovely and like, oh, it's okay, you tried, but you still have that relationship with yourself because something's not right. You have these expectations and you're not meeting them. So yeah, a big part for me was definitely doing that, and also just forgiving myself for things in the past where I feel like I didn't hit the target I was aiming for. But just knowing like, oh, I was having a challenge with this, or was difficult because of this reason. That's not necessarily within my control. It's not a inherent fault in myself. It's just a neurodiverse condition.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kelly, what
it's like
about
the
you?
diagnosis is the best treatment in a way because it gives you a reason for like the things that you experienced.
Mm.
Yeah.
Soumya, I have a question for you from Rubina. She's also a medical professional. So, what was the movie Dr. Soumya was talking about?
There's a Hindi movie called Tare Zameen Par,
Yes.
which talks about dyslexia.
Yeah.
But the child definitely also had inattentive ADHD.
Yeah.
But I think what we are getting from here is the lived experience of Ricky and Kelly, which is just fascinating. What just Ricky just mentioned in this sort of casual conversation is just fascinating. What he talked about is when we talk about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, I've said that it can be a misnomer because um, it is attention resource allocation is a problem. It's a more of an executive functioning. So a lot of people with ADHD can play video games for hours together, where you need a tremendous amount of attention and concentration. But then you
You
have
do
to
that,
do the
Ricky?
Pardon?
Do you do that
Yeah.
too? Yes.
When I was younger, I would. Yeah, I remember. I have a very distinct memory of the kids in my grade. One kid just telling me like, "Can you stop talking about video games?" Because that's all I would talk about. And yeah, I was like, grade four, and being told that at lunchtime, I was just like, "Whoa, that's yeah."
There's Soumya.
Devastating.
Yes.
Yeah, but it is as an adult you have to do multiple tasks. You have to do everything. Your bank and all the boring stuff, and
Mm,
keep appointments, time management, finishing of things, pick up your children. So many different things that you have to do. Clean your house. You can do one thing for forever, but then the other aspects of life, if you miss out on, you will not be spared. So
mm,
so that can become a problem. And as an adult with a partner, when you have got children, if you don't get the simple basic household things finished, you will be told off. And then the thing is, you are self-critical. You're continuously self-doubting whether why you are making these mistakes, and then being told off by the same problems that you are having by someone else. Why do you need another reminder? Why do you have to do this? That can be, can really crush you. But again, what Ricky just mentioned is, you have to be kind to yourself. That the diagnosis itself can be, uh, as Kelly said, the diagnosis itself can be the biggest therapy. You know about it. And then the near and dear ones also know about it, and then sometimes what we talk to the parents is, number one, this is a neurodevelopmental disorder. Parenting has not caused it. You have not caused this. But then there has to be a radical acceptance that this is what the child is. Perhaps this, you wanted to go to, uh, you know for the entire period of this 9 months of pregnancy, or it can be like you wanted to go to Venice. You have done every research about Venice. You know every little canals around the Grand Canal and all the stories of Venice. But then the plane takes you to Amsterdam, and you go to Amsterdam, and you're completely lost in Amsterdam. But that child, your idealized child, perhaps is not this child. But the child that you have is a bit different, and this radical acceptance of that can be very important. And there is nothing called being a good father or a bad, I mean, a totally good father or a totally bad parent. It's good enough is very important. So you have to be accept what is happening. The child is neurodiverse. You have to know this is ADHD. And sometimes this child, your job as a parent is very interesting. You're not a the job of a parent is to be like a gardener and not like a carpenter. You just, you have to do a bit of deviating from here and there. If it looks good enough from a distance, it is good enough. Like a shepherd, not like an engineer. You cannot engineer a child into your
Mm.
ideal child, but you just help the child to guide and become who the child is potentially almost destined to be, rather than continuously telling off. So the deadly combination is when a child has ADHD and a parent has ADHD. So two executive dysfunction can clash, and the child can land up without lunch boxes and tiffin boxes and computer. So it can be a disaster. The other problem can be an obsessive parent with a ADHD child, where the mother is or the father is continuously correcting the child, which can cause significant amount of invalidation and loss of self-esteem. So yeah, it's quite a fascinating. So it's a problem, but how the parents need to really modify their expectation can be very helpful. And the diagnosis itself diagnosis and a proper psychoeducation and understanding what we are dealing with can be a game changer.
Mm.
Thank you. I have someone saying good afternoon to all of us. Hello, Mudassik. Um, Let me ask Ricky this question. As South
Mm-hmm.
Asians, we never want to acknowledge a child who has had ADHD.
Mm.
Um, you've had to go and get yourself tested. Um, what would you like to tell parents?
Yeah, I remember when I told my parents, they were definitely they were shocked, and I just had to assure them that it wasn't something they did, like you said, and I assured them that in that time when I was in school, like it wasn't as well known about. And I think there's just general there can be a bit of stigma about things and a tendency to pretend like things are fine or they don't exist. And ultimately, there might be some concerns of what people know and how things look in the community, but it's for the child's best benefit ultimately to get the support they need.
Thank you. Kelly, your journey. Let's
Um,
talk to parents with children. You were bullied in school. We keep talking about bullying. And so, what would you like to tell parents?
um, I think making it so your child feels comfortable talking to you and safe talking to you. Otherwise, they're just going to hide things that they don't feel safe talking about. So, yeah, I think that it's important to seek treatment if you think that you have ADHD, because it's very detrimental to not seek treatment. And if you just ignore it, um, just pretend that it doesn't exist, it doesn't go away. You're just pretending, and then it gets worse and worse. So
Samir, what would you like to tell parents? Because we are judgmental. We will hide, we will not talk about it, we will not take our children out. We do all kinds of things, and we know as South Asians we do it. I mean, you know it, I know it, Ricky knows it.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't have a lot of experience with South Asians. I've got more experience with Australians. I mean, everyone does it. Like everyone does the same. But the thing is, we have to acknowledge the parents' distress. I mean, it's not easy. For a flamboyantly ADHD child who is, difficult behavior-wise, often they are told by their neighbors or other family members that you are allowed to come, but don't bring your child. You have to keep a
No,
babysitter. So
really?
that very often, and often we have children with 20% of kids with ADHD or other way around with autism spectrum can have ADHD. So they can go to the places and not even, I mean, here we have heard it many times, even in India. The parents can be so isolated because of their children's behavior problems. They would be told straight away by their other family members that that other cousins and big family get-togethers that this is a naughty child, you're a naughty child, and then the parents are also being blamed for their parenting. Often, I mean, like, this is almost parent bashing and putting the parents down for causing the problem for the child. So the parents will naturally internalize this problem. They will be exasperated. They will be angry. So number one thing that we have to tell the parents is, number one, be be aware of this radical acceptance. This is what, and uh, we will tell you the story about Amsterdam. It's not Venice, but it is Amsterdam. It's beautiful. I mean, you just go around and explore the beautiful countryside, or the Amsterdam city, which has its own charms. So that is very important. And then there's nothing called good parenting. Good enough is good enough. And then uh, we can use this entire psychoeducation about ADHD, that this is a self-regulation problem. This time management issues. These children have short problems with memories. Then we can give them lots of practical hands-on help around how to organize this child. Often it is about giving them memory, like sticky tapes, sticky notes, and things like that to organize themselves, helping them to time manage. And then it really, do they get addicted to computer games? Because they're getting reward straight away. They're getting things, and they're getting continuous reward. Really helps them. So we have to utilize a different reward principle, and in helping this children. Often the criticism from the parents would be, are we really creating this super hyper materialistic children? But you are living in a very material world anyway. So but these children are, they need a different style of parenting. But when we see parents who are really educated about what we are going through and understand the difficulties very well, you know uh, that can be a game changer. And as you know, there are a lot of genetics around that. Some of the parents can identify with this, that they themselves had this issue. So yeah. And acknowledging that parenting is the most difficult job in the whole wide world. It is really important to, first of all, validate the parents' distress, asking them to be a bit kind and forgiving to the children, to take it, enjoy the child's uniqueness, and delight in the child as much as possible, and be forgiving to themselves. This obsessive need of perfection sometimes can really clash, and some of the things which really works with normal children will not it can spectacularly backfire with these children. And the big issue is about physical discipline. And where and invalidation and being brutal to these children, because words can hurt, and that can have such a devastating impact on the children forever, and that needs to be really understood.
Thank you.
but but there are some wonderful, excellent resources nowadays available, on really on the internet, which parents can go through. You have given an example of Russell Barkley's videos. I mean, these other people who have worked in the field for many years, and there are books about parenting, uh, that there's a wonderful book that Russell Barkley has recently written, 12 things that every parent should know about ADHD, how to raise a child with ADHD. So there are some excellent tips for parents um, about this area.
Thank you. Um, Before we say goodbye, Ricky, what have you? What has been your, let's say, what suggestion would you give our viewers?
Um, I think what Doctor said about self-acceptance is probably the biggest one. Rather than going like, okay, I've got this, how am I going to fix it? You're not going to fix it. It's about, learning to work with it and accept it, really.
Thank you. Kelly, we started with you. So, what is your suggestion?
I just wanted to say some good points about people with ADHD. So we can be very entrepreneurial, like Ricky has his blog. We can be very creative, like I did a degree in music. And we're also really compassionate and sensitive. So we do have good points as well. And if you have ADHD, find other people that have ADHD, because you'll probably get along with them. And it's very hard to find people who do the exact same thing as you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. This has been a very, very important discussion. Um, Thank you so much.
Thank
Take
you.
care of yourself.